this equals this, and that equals that. Anyway. Hey there! Welcome to Advanced Monday Afternoon live stream. Good to have you with us again. My name is Peter, and I'm joined this week by David. Hello, David.
Hello, Peter. Thank you so much for having me back on the Advanced live stream. I love every chance to interact with all you guys.
Yes, always great to have David with us. And we have a great topic for you this week, how to argue well. How to argue well. And as we'll see, let's say right off the bat here, we're not talking about shouting, we're not talking about calling people names, we're not talking about arguing in the bad way.
Right.
We're talking about arguing like what lawyers do, or arguing what you do when you want to persuade someone of something. And arguing really isn't that common. Yes, it's something we do around the dinner table sometimes when, you know, the uncle or aunt has had a little too much to drink and we start to feel more comfortable about expressing our opinions. But arguing is also something that takes place. If I might say to Dave, take your coat before we leave, it's going to rain. Now, what if he doesn't want to take his coat?
I looked at the weather report and I didn't see anything about rain. I don't think I need to bring my coat.
Oh yeah, but look out the window right now. You can see there's dark clouds in the sky, and when there's dark clouds in the sky, it always rains.
Just because there are dark clouds, Peter, doesn't mean it's rain. It could be some smoke from a nearby bonfire. It could be anything.
You see, we argue all the time. You know, it just doesn't always get into, you're an idiot. Unfortunately, it does a lot. So hopefully today we can help you to argue well. And this does come from an article in your monthly Advanced magazine, month of April right here. The article is not about arguing per se. It's on deep sea mining, which is a possible way to find a clean energy source, but possibly at severe cost to the environment. Finding these things on the ocean floor that have minerals, elements needed for clean energy equipment and such, but harvesting them from the ocean floor might disturb the natural ecology there, the natural wildlife there. So it's a contentious topic. Contentious, big word there, just means something that is debatable, something that you might argue about. So we thought, let's talk about arguing.
Yeah. We talked about it coming at mining those minerals coming at a cost. Speaking of costs, Steve told us that he just did some Children's Day shopping and he found a Hot Wheels super
Treasure Hunt Audi 90
Quattro. That's groovy.
Nice, Steve.
And hello, Carson and Peter. Kaysen and Peter, thanks so much for the good afternoon. Good afternoon to you as well.
Hey, Kaysen. Hey, yes, Peter, good to have you with us. And Joy, good to see you again.
Good to see you back.
Joy, great. Go get to argue with Trump about the terrible tariffs. Yeah, so as you can see,
call him up after this live stream.
There's always something to argue about, especially in this day of the internet when, you know, we don't always have to sit right next to the person that we're arguing. Somehow it makes a lot of us want to argue more
It sure does.
when it's just words on the screen. So anyway, let's jump right in here with our poll question. Do you like to argue? Just, you know, get a sense of the waters here. Do you like to argue? Yes! Give me a topic. I'm ready to go right now. I was on the high school debate team.
Were you really?
I was not.
Okay.
I'm just representing this person.
Got it.
I know I wasn't on the high school debate team, although my father was a lawyer, so it kind of runs in the family.
For sure.
Do you like to argue? Yes, give me a topic. If I feel deeply about the topic, I can argue, but not just about anything. I'm not good at it. You know, maybe I like to, maybe I don't, but I'm just not good at it, so I don't like to. I'm a lover, not a fighter, you know, to quote the man, Michael Jackson. So anyway, if you are a lover and not a fighter, that's great. Again, this is not about fighting just for the sake of fighting, just for the sake of being mean and nasty to people and hurting people. This is about arguing well, not just so that you win, but so that the argument is more of a social interaction rather than just, I'm right, you're wrong, blah, 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 blah. So, our first vocab word for you is, kind of a long one, hang on, discernment.
Discernment.
D-I-S-C-E-R-N-E-M-E-N-T, discernment.
Discernment.
And David, what does discernment mean?
Discernment is the ability to see things clearly, right? So if someone tells you something and it doesn't sound quite right, that might be because you are discerning that something about what they've said is not quite right. Especially nowadays, maybe they show you a picture on Facebook and they say, hey, look at this politician. They're at this place, look at them, they're drunk on the street, and you look at the picture, and instead of just believing it, you discern and you say, bro, you made that with ChatGPT. Like you're discerned that maybe is not actually real news.
Right, and discernment is a good thing to keep in mind just before you might be getting into an argument. You want to discern. You want to think to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I'm in conflict with this person on this topic, but is this the best way to go forward? Is this getting into an argument with them about it? Is this person open to hearing other points of view? Am I open to hearing other points of view? Are we in a place where if things get a little heated, it's going to be all right? Or are we, in a place where that would not be a good thing? You want to be discerning and use discernment before you get into an argument, especially for those of you who just like to argue at the drop of a hat like me. So I need to practice discernment.
Another word that starts with a D is discussion, by a guy whose name starts with a D, David Lin.
David, hello.
He says he prefers discussion more than arguing. That's actually an interesting kind of distinction or difference to make.
Yeah.
If you have sometimes when people think of arguing, they think of like an angry discussion.
Right. A discussion, an argument is sort of an impassioned discussion. It's a discussion that gets a little elevated, a little more excited. But a discussion can also be just not people necessarily trying to convince each other to change their view. A discussion can just be, have you ever been to Venezuela? Oh yeah, I went there once. What'd you do? Oh, I did this. Oh, I did that too.
Right.
And that's a discussion. You could also call it a conversation, but you will also hear the word discussion used to describe a casual conversation that you have.
Yeah. Peter likes to argue with the LLMs.
The LLMs.
That's actually pretty fun. Oh, so if you argue with ChatGPT, then they'll probably just agree with you. Whatever you're saying, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. I should have said that." If you argue with something like Grok, then it will just tell you you're stupid, possibly.
We'll do another episode on arguing specifically with artificial intelligence.
That's
but
right.
Today we're focusing on human beings. Let's give you another vocab word here: off-ramp.
Off-ramp.
OFF-RAMP, off-ramp.
Off-ramp.
David, what is an off-ramp?
An off-ramp, is usually when you're talking about roads. When you're on a highway, an off-ramp is an exit from the highway that takes you down. So, for example, you're on the Gaoshan, right, and you're driving and you're trying to go to Taichung. There's an off-ramp that will lead you to some part of Taichung City. You can get off the freeway using that off-ramp. But in conversation, an off-ramp is a way to sort of end or escape the conversation, usually before it gets too intense.
Right, and an off-ramp is very important to have if you are thinking you're going to get into an argument or are in an argument already. And again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing to get into an argument. If you and the other person can present reasons to change each other's opinions without getting too upset about it, then an argument can be really fun because you might learn something about their point of view, you might learn something about your own point of view and how maybe you believe in something that isn't really, that you don't really have good reasons for. So an argument is not necessarily just a bad outcome of something. Anyway, the point being, with an off-ramp, you do want to have a way to get out of the argument, just like you want to get out of or off of the road, if things do seem to be getting a little heated, if maybe the other person isn't really up for it, or if they, or if you start to feel like you're losing control. You want to provide an off-ramp, and a great off-ramp to sort of get out of an argument that's getting out of control is to say something like, well, David, you've really given me something to think about.
Right, and then you walk away.
Yeah, like whether to take his coat for the rain or not. Well, we went back and forth there a little bit, and if I can see in my mind that he's probably not going to change his mind and that it wouldn't really be productive to keep arguing about it, I'll just say something like that. Well, David, you've really given me something to think about. I haven't said that he convinced me. I've just said, I'll think about that. That's an off-ramp from an argument that can kind of cool things down, diffuse the situation.
I think that Steve has had some pretty bad experiences with it.
Yes.
He says that sometimes when people argue, it will cause people to get angry, and I don't like being around that either. So Steve says that he'll sometimes, when he hears his classmates arguing different opinions, he just goes to the park and does some artwork. That's actually a very good way to deal with that. If you don't really like being around people who are maybe they're having discussions or arguments that are a little bit too angry or too intense, you can just go someplace alone, get some space, get some quiet, do some artwork. That's a good idea, Steve.
Right. That's an example of using discernment. Steve can see, or in those cases, that the arguing would just be sort of a way to start shouting and being mean to people and being rude and such. And so he just said, I'm taking an off-ramp and I'm going to go and just finish my artwork. Good going, Steve. Let's throw in a discussion question here just for you all. We'll go back to the vocab in just a sec, but want to give you a discussion question just to kind of get you more into the swing of things here. What is something that you like to argue about? But, even if you feel that you're a lover, not a fighter, even if you don't really know how to argue, what is something you like to argue about? Because an argument can be about what restaurant will we go to? Oh, let's go to Burger King. No. We should support local businesses. Let's go to the nearby Biendong place. We got an argument right there. Now, it isn't to the point where I'm saying you're an idiot and he says you're a jerk, but that is an argument. That's a simple argument. So what do you like to argue about? You like to argue about your favorite movie, the best movie ever made, the best music ever made, or the best restaurant? There are all kinds of things that we like to argue about, in a kind of fun way, in a light way, because ultimately the best movie, who's going to say what the best movie is? It's a matter of taste, but we like to talk about it. We like to argue about it, like, oh, that's a good movie because of this and that, and so on and so forth. So what do you like to argue about? Agatha has chimed in. Is argue a bad thing? Kids like to argue with their parents.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's true, but I think like Peter was saying, arguments are not always, they can be bad. Like in that case, the parent says, go brush your teeth. And the kid says, well, I don't want to brush my teeth. I want to play video games. They're arguing with their parents, but that's not a good argument. That's just annoying. They need to go brush their teeth.
Right, that's just disobedience.
Right.
We're talking about arguing between peers, where each person, one person does not have a certain kind of authority over the other person.
Although I know that it can get very complicated here. Maybe you want to do something very reasonable. You want to go to art school because you're passionate about that. But your parents say, no, you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer because otherwise you won't have any money. Well, they shouldn't tell you what you can study, especially after you're an adult. So that can become an argument. In that situation, you just need to use discernment, I think. Sometimes it's not really worth trying to convince them to your way. Maybe you just need to find another way.
Yeah. Some other things that people like to argue about. Peter says, always agree to disagree.
Good off-ramp.
Off-ramp. Good example of an off-ramp there, Peter. We'll have to agree to disagree. Kaysen, probably when it comes to academic topics. Sure, academic topics. People love it. That's what scholars do. Yeah. They argue about their area of focus, their academic topic. Yeah. I would like to argue a little bit more. Peter Chung also says language issue, joy, political issues. Oh, joy.
I don't like arguing about politics.
The great temptation, but politics is a part of life. And so if we are sooner or later, we're probably going to argue about it. So we want to argue about it well.
Yeah, I think for Janet, feeling like you're misunderstood is something that can cause an argument to escalate or get even more intense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that can be hard to deal with.
David Lynn, I often have argument about where to have lunch with my kids during the weekend. Of course, exactly. We argue all the time. Let's learn to argue well, is the point. Yeah. Kaysen, academic context, right? Claire, 06071. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Claire.
When my kids argue with each other, I always step away or watch distantly. Yes. They learn how to deal with the argument.
I do. Yeah, I basically do that too. I kind of wait and watch. And if it gets to that point where people
has
are just
2
like,
kids.
yeah, I have 2 kids, and when I hear that, like, oh, yeah, and I'm like, oh, okay. Then I got to step in and maybe figure out what's going on, because they obviously can't deal with it themselves.
Right.
But you have to give kids space to learn how to reconcile with each other.
Right, because when they're 30, 40 years old, you're not going to be around to break up their arguments every time they get in an argument with someone. They have to develop that skill themselves at some point. It's tricky, though. I mean, I have no kids myself, so I can't speak from experience, but it's tricky. Steve, something I like to argue about the restaurant, because most of the time when waiters have bad service, me and my dad will say they need to learn mistakes when they're being rude and sending the wrong food. Yes.
You and your dad seem to be on the same level.
Anyway, thanks for all the chiming ins. You can keep them coming. Let's keep giving you some more vocabulary here. Let's give you an important word for argument, deduction.
Deduction.
Now, this is deduction, deduction. A deduction, sometimes we think of that, we hear that in a detective novel. The great Sherlock Holmes, is able to deduct who the killer was from looking at the evidence and connecting it together. He makes that deduction. But a deductive argument, the form of argument known as deduction, is the most basic kind that you might hear. It's basically, for you math people out there, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So if all human beings, I had to write this down, if all humans are living beings and all living beings are mortal, then all humans are mortal. That's deduction.
That's
the deductive argument. Another important term, though, David, that you need to tell us about for arguing is fallacy. 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 What is that?
So fallacy is like a wrong or mistaken idea. Oftentimes, when you connect 2 things just because they happen to be close to each other, but they're not actually the same thing. We were talking about this earlier, like the idea that when ice cream sales increase, there are more sharks that are attacking people, right? Okay, maybe people are buying ice cream and going to the beach, and then going to the beach that might have some sharks nearby, then the sharks might attack people. But ice cream and sharks are not directly related. If you try to relate those in an argument and you say, every time ice cream sales go up, shark attacks also increase. We need to put tariffs on the ice cream companies so that they stop increasing shark attacks. That would be a fallacy.
Right. Specifically, that would be a causal fallacy, a fallacy about the cause of the shark attacks. A causal fallacy. Other kinds of fallacies, maybe you've heard of this one, the bandwagon fallacy. The bandwagon fallacy. It's an English expression. To jump on the bandwagon means to just do something because everyone else is doing it. And so in arguing, the bandwagon fallacy is to say something is good or okay or true because everyone does it. Like, for example, David, you can wait till the last minute to write your term paper. Everyone does it.
Everybody's doing it. Well, I'll just do it too. I'll jump on the bandwagon.
Right. Now, he could do that. I don't think it'd be very wise, but he could do that. But it's not true just because everyone else is doing it. That's a fallacy. That's the bandwagon fallacy. Peter Chung, perfect imitation. Thank you, or Dave thanks you as well. And Muhao Su. I hope I'm pronouncing that well.
Muhao Su.
My son usually argues about screen time.
Most people's sons usually argue about screen time, so you're not alone. Yeah, Minecraft is very addicting.
And would your daughters bring this issue up?
We try to keep them and the screens separate as much as possible, but yes, still there are times when they say, "Oh, we want to play Super Mario. Finish your homework first."
Yeah. Kaysen says the example given by teacher Peter and the word fallacy were both concepts I learned in philosophy class when I was a freshman. Kaysen. Cool. There's a man who likes to argue. Anyone who studied philosophy is very much in the swim of arguing, definitely. Okay, we're just about done. Unfortunately, the time always just flies by, but let's throw you one more as we're going out here. This is a useful one. Even if you don't argue that much, it's a good term to know because you'll hear it. Straw man.
Straw man.
S-T-R-A-W, straw man, M-A-N. Straw man. David, what's a straw man?
A straw man is sort of when you are having an argument with someone, and then they sort of take your argument and they create kind of like a false bad version of it.
Right.
You know,
or your whole position,
Yeah.
your whole belief system. They will present it in a way that is distorted,
Yeah,
that is
twisted.
wrong and twisted. I mean, maybe there's a kernel of truth in it, but it's distorted in a way that any person would say, oh, well, that's obviously wrong.
Right, and
But
then
that's because they've distorted it.
Exactly. And then once you say, oh, that's not true, then they say, oh, look, see, you agree with me.
Yeah.
But actually, they were just tricking you into attacking your own position by presenting it in a twisted way.
Right, and they call it a straw man, maybe you can guess, because a literal man made of straw, very easy to knock down. It's just made of straw, as opposed to a brick man or a concrete man, which they don't have an expression for, but
don't, no.
that's the origin of straw man anyway. You'll hear it come up. Politicians using it in speeches, sometimes they'll create a cause that they are the ones that they can lead you away from or towards, but they will distort it or exaggerate it in such a way that it's really just a straw man, and they're using it hoping you won't think about it too closely. So that's one good thing about arguing, is that it does force you to think closely about things so that you know what you're talking about.
Steve is a lover and not a fighter. And looks like he likes to kind of be a peacemaker. He will share his hobbies and let other people stop arguing and to then talk about their favorite things instead. Blessed are the peacemakers, Steve.
Blessed are the peacemakers, Steve. And thank you all for joining us. That is all the time we have for today. Hope this gave you something to think about next time you find yourself in an argument, or about to get into an argument, or tempted to get into an argument with someone online. Just think about, okay, maybe this is going to be an argument. How can I argue well?
That's right.
We'll be back next Monday with another topic, more English vocab for you, chance to interact with you here. But that is it for today. Have yourselves a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Same advanced time, same advanced channel.
Now.
Oh, where were we? Oh, that's right.
Yeah.